All right, and it's all yours, Wes.
Well, thank you. Thanks to the Holderness Public Library and my friend Ted Van Zandt, who put us in touch. My name is Wes Golomb, and I wrote a book recently called Warm and Cool Homes. It's about net zero houses, and this is a little about me. I'm a clean energy advocate.
Can I suggest that people turn off their cameras? That way we'll get a better look at you.
Okay. I think that's controlled by what you, by on top of your screen there, you can minimize it. If you go to the top of your, where everybody's face is, you can just minimize.
All you have to do is go down to the icon that says start video and click on that.
No, I
Turn
understand.
off the camera.
Okay, whatever. So anyway, here we go. I've been at this for a little while. When I was in college, I helped to organize the first Earth Day, and I've been at it ever since. Currently, I'm on the Deerfield Energy Committee, and Deerfield, New Hampshire. We're working on a variety of projects here in town. And let me just move on. So my book is the story of 4 net zero homes. These owners report they're the most comfortable houses they've ever lived in. 2 of the 4 have reported improved health. And this is a straw bale house in Sanborn, New Hampshire, that's been off the grid since, I think it's 2001 or 2002. And they recently told me that when they inquired about getting poles and wires into their house, that it cost the same thing, $5,000. This was back at the beginning of the 2000s, as it did for them to install their first PV system. So they did that instead. All 4 of the net zero homes, and this one here is net zero ready, heat, cool, and electrify for less than $500 a year. And the fellow that lives in this house here, that's called the house that Jack built. He actually charges his car and heats and cools and electrifies for less than $500 a year. So let's look at it from the big picture. What we're trying to do, or part of the reason for building these houses, is to decarbonize or move toward decarbonizing society. And one of the strategies that's believed to be likely to work if we followed it through is the following, which is efficiency, meaning making products and using only what energy you need to use to get a task done. So for example, you might have incandescent lighting and that gets the job done, but you could do it with an LED, which is more efficient. Electrify, typically when you convert a fossil fuel, an engine, to a motor, it saves about 1/3 right off the top of energy. And the third leg of the stool is to generate that electricity sustainably. And in a nutshell, that's what a net zero house does. We use as little energy as possible and convert everything to electricity, and then generate the energy typically with solar, or although if you happen to have a windy spot or a fast flowing stream, there are other ways it can be done, certainly, but by and large, here in the Northeast anyway, there's generally good or better solar sites than for wind. This is a chart of how houses are rated using a HERS system, which is one of several ways of rating a house. And energy auditors come in and do this rating. And an older house you'll find up here in the 100 to 150 range. The higher the number, the less efficient. The lower the number, the more efficient. And these minus numbers, counterintuitive, are positive energy homes, homes that are generating more energy than they use. And Jack's house, Jack Bingham's house, that one I pointed out before, is near or close to this point right here. But meanwhile, you've heard of Energy Star probably, and an Energy Star home comes in about 85, a conventional house around 100, and then we get down, here's a zero energy ready or net zero ready, we call them, home at about 50, 55. LEED, these are each different standards. Passive house, which is what a lot of what I've been writing about is based on, is a 35 or lower, and a net zero energy home then is a 0. And these homes save money. Most of these are pretty intuitive, lower carbon emissions. One that you may not have thought of is that if you've got a house that has solar, it strengthens the grid at key times. The times when the sun is cooking is also the times when we're using the most energy. You know, your air conditioner is going, except for certain individuals who won't be named in the group. You know, that's when the grid is taxed, and that's the exact time when your solar, if you're net metered, is putting energy back on the grid. And finally, if you look around at the effect of a war halfway around the world, it might help us provide true national security if we could provide a significant amount of our energy without having to go to petro dictators to get it. Okay, so the biggest thing you could do, and if you're a homeowner already, this is where your ears are going to perk up with interest, perhaps. The biggest thing you could do is understand how some basic building science works and use that to your advantage if you're trying to save energy in your shell. So some basic, simple stuff that you probably already know. Heat moves from warm to cool. Cool air is denser, so it sinks. That's why a lot of people think that heat rises. And there are 3 methods of transfer that we're going to examine today, and how they affect a house: convection, conduction, and radiation. And we want to know a little bit about how moisture moves. So one of the things you want to know is that warm air holds more moisture than cold air. Have you ever felt hot, or have you ever felt the humidity when it's about to snow? It's 98, 99, 100% humidity, but you don't feel it. That's because physically the cold air can't hold as much moisture as the warm air. And secondly, you know this intuitively also, when warm, moist air touches a cold surface, it condenses, like on your window after you take a shower. So what we're looking at here in a home is your envelope. And here's a quick video about this. These videos come along with my book.
Define the envelope of the house itself. The important thing at this point is this red line here. This defines what we're dealing with. Footing grains all the way up to the roof shingles and everything in between. As opposed to just focusing on the first floor and the second floor and the rooms in them, and ignoring these spaces that are also part of the envelope. The envelope defines the inside from the outside, the ambient temperature of the planet, of the air around you, from whatever you want the living conditions to be inside. In the envelope, this line defines the thermal barrier of the house, the air barrier of the house, and the moisture barrier of the house. And those 3 things are 3 components of things that will make a big difference in the comfort in your house and how you live in it. the biggest factor is just awareness, to be aware that these are issues that have to be dealt with. Because in most cases, in standard construction, very few of them are dealt with effectively, or very few of them are even thought about. Our goal is to get you to think about these things and pay attention to them when you're building and make the changes that you need to get a good comfortableness. Define the.
Okay, so first of all, I should introduce, that was Bob Irving, my friend and comrade in energy, who is a net zero home builder and actually an award-winning net zero home builder, and who really contributed a lot to the book and this whole project. Any questions before we move on? Okay.
Nothing yet, but just a reminder, anybody, you feel free to leave questions in the chat as well.
Or right now, shut off your, turn on your mic rather and ask directly. Feel free. Okay, let's move along. Okay, so you want to, the first thing you want to look at if you are thinking about a retrofit of your house, or if you're building a new house, is water. You want to drain the water away from there. If you're having moisture problems in your basement, you've got to solve them from the start, because otherwise it's just going to be an uphill battle the whole way. So if you have a damp basement, you want to figure out how to get it dry. In my house, they built French drains around the house and they drained the water away. And I've had no problems since we did that. The people who dug it, I didn't dig it. I just live there. So anyway, so here's another video.
Concrete is porous. It absorbs water. The water in the concrete is absorbed into the basement and therefore into the house. First thing we do is we usually coat the footings with a latex masonry paint that acts as a capillary break to keep moisture from wicking up through the footing and into the walls and up into the walls. We put a layer of stone between the bottom of the footing level and the top of the footing level. Wash stone gives us a place to put our radon vent pipe that collects radon gases that are vented out of the roof of the house. The stone also forms a really good base for insulation and for foam. It's fairly easy to level pretty well. On top of that, we put 4 to 6 inches of expanded polystyrene insulation. On top of that, we put a 6 to 10 mil plastic vapor barrier to try to make the plastic continuous and unbroken. And then the concrete floor is poured on top of that.
And that way, all the water stays under the concrete.
That's our goal, is to have all the water in the concrete. On the walls, we use a polyisocyanurate foam, which is the yellow crumbly foam, and it's covered with aluminum foil on both sides. And that foam is impermeable to moisture, which means if you put it against the concrete, the moisture does not come off of the concrete, through the concrete and into the house. It is stopped by that foam. So that takes care of our walls and our floors, and we've kept a lot of the moisture that's naturally coming into houses out of the house. Concrete is porous.
Okay, so if you've got a retrofit, you obviously can't start the way Bob did there with the gravel on your way up and work your way up. But what you can do is put styrofoam insulation down on the floor, and you can put plywood. And I understand the best way to do that is use 2 layers of plywood at 90-degree angles to each other, screw them together, and you'll have a reasonably well insulated floor. Basement walls, you can use polyisocyanurate like Bob was using there, but keep it 1/4 of an inch off the ground because moisture will wick its way up if it gets the opportunity. And if you've got uneven walls like a rock wall or a lot of holes, you can use spray foam insulation. Spray foam has some potential issues, but it's the only thing that will really work with, say, a rock wall or some other foundations. I should say the only thing that works effectively. And here's okay, let's talk about humidity in the air.
Can hold less moisture than warm air. In the winter, the cold air that leaks into a house is also very dry. Once in the house, though, that air is heated by the heating system and it picks up any moisture in the house, moisture that might be there from showers or cooking. The warm, moist air then rises and exits the building through cracks in the upper part of the envelope. This is why many houses are very dry in the winter. Another effect of this unplanned ventilation is that warm, moist air rises until it hits a cold roof where it can condense. This condensation can lead to mold and rot in the wood, and the heat that moves through the roof can melt snow, which then runs down the roof until it hits the unheated eaves where it freezes, causing ice dams. In many homes, the largest source of heat loss and wasted energy is the air forced out by this convective. As a result, energy must be constantly used to keep air, which is infiltrated into the house. In net zero homes, the air barrier is planned and then meticulously sealed. This limits the convective loop, keeping the heat where you want it, in the home.
Hi, this is Bob Irving. This is an infrared image of cold air coming into the house where you don't want it. This is an electrical outlet in an outside wall. The coldest part of the outlet is dark blue, and you can see the spikes coming off of that, which change from green to yellow. That indicates cold air coming in from the outside through cracks in the wall and gaps in the sheathing. This is an infrared image of cold air coming in where the wall meets the ceiling. This is an infrared image of a recessed light, which is off. Air is leaking in around the gaps between the light and the ceiling. When on, the heat from the bulb warms the air around it, which then rises through the ceiling, speeding up the air and heat loss. These examples of infiltration are needless and costly. By paying attention to details,
you'll edit the film right, edit the video right. Sorry about that. What he meant to say is by paying attention to details, you can limit that that air leakage and cut that convective loop down. And that's perhaps the most important thing you could do, the best thing you could do, most cost effective, the cheapest very often, because it doesn't cost a lot of money for caulking relative to some other things. So you find and caulk the leaks. When you're building a new house, here's some of the things that he's doing. He seals around the windows except on the bottom so that if any moisture gets in, it can get out. He uses, in this case, this is a gasket that goes at the sill, and the wood of the sill and the concrete expand and contract at different rates. And by having the gasket there, and I'll show you in a minute or so another way that that he's doing this. And finally, this is one of the newer techniques for air sealing. This product is called Henry Blueskin, and it's a stick and seal. You peel the thing off and stick it on the wall, and it this house that used this had an air change rate of half the last one, half of the previous one. And largely because of that. So here is, sorry about that slight technical detail.
We start with plastic under the slab, above the slab insulation, tie that into the air sealing on the basement walls and tape it. So that's airtight. And then we use a rubber gasket between the top of the foundation and the wooden sill. On the exterior walls, we tape all the joints of the exterior walls and caulk the top and bottom of the walls because that is two areas that cannot be taped. On our windows, we tape the two sides and the top on the outside, leaving the bottom open to drain. And we fill the cavities with a non-expanding spray foam, and we tape the inside on all four sides. So you won't have cold air coming in around your windows. We install a sealing membrane under the ceiling insulation and above the 1x3 strapping to air seal the ceiling of the house. And once the house is closed in and air sealed and the windows are in and taped, we do our first blower door test. This gives us a measure of how we are at this point in construction and allows us to find any other random leaks that we need to fix before we get the house insulated. The water vapor travels through exterior walls carried by air. Stopping the air leaks means more of the water vapor stays inside the house, so your house isn't as dry in the winter. We use one called heat recovery ventilator, or an HRV, which brings in the required amount of fresh air, keep you healthy, and keep your range hood fan and your dryer working as they should. The HRV brings in fresh air 24/7 and exhausts the same amount of stale air. The outgoing stream of warm, stale air passes through a heat exchanger, which consists of a grate of thin aluminum sheets, which absorb the heat and transfer it to the stream of incoming cold air. Then we locate exhaust grills in baths and laundries, along with a booster switch, where you can increase the airflow to clear the air efficiently. In a standard house, the direct airflow from the inside to the outside brings needless air leakage like you see in this infrared image of a typical bathroom fan, which has been turned off.
So as I mentioned, he's doing a couple of newer things here. There's another way of air sealing at the sill. And this is a membrane that's stuck on here onto the inside of the foundation, up around, under the sill rather, and then up the inside. So no air could get in there. This is all sealed. This is sealed to this surface. This is sealed to the bottom, and then the weight of the house is on it. And then this is sealed up the side. And again, that and the Henry Blueskin, and he was coming in previously at about 1 air change per hour, which is the measure, the volume of air in the house, how often it changes. And this house here with the Henry Blueskin came in at about half that. I think it was 0.56 or 0.6 in that range. So pretty significant. And I'm gonna, basically what you wanna know here is that a blower door is your friend if you're doing a retrofit. If your house is leaky, have a blower door test done, and you can find out where the leaks are and how to seal them up. Well, where to seal up, and then you go about sealing them up however you need to, really. So, questions so far?
Nothing yet.
Okay. The biggest thing you could do to your house is air seal. You stop that convective loop, your house is going to stay warmer. Your house is going to be, if it's dry now, it'll be, it won't be as dry in the winter. Well, not now, but particularly in the winter. If you have ice dams, if you seal it up, that's the source of your ice dams. And moving right along. Okay, so we said we were going to talk about how heat moves, because you want to stop it from moving from inside your house to outside. And by the way, as it gets, the weather gets warmer, it's the whole thing in reverse. You want to keep the heat out instead of in. And the same goes, obviously in hot climates. So what you see here are a couple of images of infrared images we took. And this is on the inside on the left, and you can see blue is cold, and it's coming through the studs and the framing and the walls, the heat that is, and looking from the outside relative to the cold. It was pretty cold. See that? It says it was -40. I live at the North Pole. Actually, that's not true. Actually, this blue here, it was taking the temperature of outer space basically and reading it -40. But you could see the house, the warmest, the white spot right up here above here is 25 degrees. That's the warmest spot in the picture. And you can see the heat that's that looks blue here because it's relatively, this is relatively cool. You could see relative to the outside, that same stud is very warm and it's radiating heat off of it. Okay, so another video.
I put this silver teaspoon in a cup of boiling water. The teaspoon was cool when I put it in, and when I touch it now, it's hot. Why is that? It's one of the ways that heat moves, and that's called conduction, and you probably know that. But did you know that conduction is a major source of heat loss in houses? In a typical house in winter, the inside of the studs is warm and the outside is cold. The wood conducts heat from warm to cold continuously. This is an infrared image of a studded wall. White is hot, red a little cooler than white, and blue is the coldest. You can see where the insulation is between the studs is red. It's warm. You can see the studs are yellow, which indicates that they are conducting heat. And you can see the framing on the top and the left side is conducting even more heat. In this image, taken at night outside in the winter, you can see the spot where the X is 12.2 degrees. And you can see very clearly the studs and heat loss around the window. The surface area of all that wood conducting heat can be as much as 1/3 of the total surface area of the house and is a source of a lot of heat loss. In net zero energy homes, we try and limit the amount of that heat loss, which is also called thermal bridging. And one technique for doing that is building double-walled houses.
This is it's a 10-inch double wall. We have two 2x4 walls with a 3-inch space
Why is that better than just having a deeper wall?
because we don't have any conductive heat loss from the inside to the outside, which is called thermal bridging. The plywood here is actually an example of thermal bridging. We have a piece of plywood here. It's going to be warm on the inside, cold on the outside, and it goes from inside to outside. You can't avoid some thermal bridging.
Once built, the only place you really notice the double wall and extra thickness is around windows and doors. This photograph gives you an idea of what it looks like. Framed walls aren't the only part of the house which can lose heat from conductive heat loss. Concrete is a good conductor of heat, and since we include the basement as part of the envelope, we need to insulate it effectively. Rigid foam insulation offers a continuous barrier and can be used in both basement and roof application. I put this.
Okay, so in building a new house, here's some other ways of avoiding thermal bridging. And this is called insulated concrete forms. The house I was pointing out before, that's the net zero ready house, used these. And these are insulation that also serve as the forms, and they pour the concrete for the basement in there. And once hardened, they leave the forms on, they leave the insulation on. So you've got concrete sandwiched by insulation, that's continuous insulation. So there's no place where there's studs or anything, any way heat can significantly conduct through. And you can see he insulated the floor here too, and he's got his PEX tubing down there for his heating. Another system for doing this so you don't have any thermal bridging. These are called structural insulated panels, and they are foam insulation sandwiched with plywood or a form of faux plywood and spleened together. Another way to stop a lot of conductive heat loss is to build with straw. And I believe that this straw bale house is R32 with the walls. And you can see there, they've left a little spot open where you can see that it's actually built with straw. It's really a beautiful house. If you are retrofitting, these are your friends. If you can get to the outside, this is, by the way, that ventilation system you saw was a retrofit system from my house. And I think, no, this one isn't my house, but this is what we did. Basically, we put foam insulation on the outside of our house and we taped it like you see here, and then used a lot of what can I think of what it's called here? Caulking, sorry. So, by the way, one more thing, the caulking, you do not want to use expanding foam around windows. You'll see in hardware sections or in the box stores, the spray foam, and you've got expanding foam and standard foam. Use the standard, the non-expanding foam around your windows, or you'll have trouble opening them afterwards. This is a fact sheet. Actually, there's too much here really to go into tonight, but this is a fact sheet about insulation. You can find it in the book. And basically, some of the things you might want to know is fiberglass lets a lot of air move through, which carries water with it, and has a high global warming factor, meaning it uses a lot of climate gases. It puts a lot in the atmosphere in the process of making it and using it. Foam also does that. There's some cases where foam, like that basement we were talking about before, where foam is really the only option that will work. Sometimes in a sill, you use foam, but it also has a high global warming factor, and there's some issues potentially with outgassing. According to somebody I talked to at the EPA, it's never been life cycle tested, and they just don't know how it's going to react after a while. Radiant heat loss is when we transfer heat through from warm to cold. So you know, radiant heat, if you're standing in front of a fire and your front is getting warm and your back is still cold, that's radiant heat. And radiant heat is based on the difference in temperature between two objects. For example, you and a window. So even if your air temperature is 70 degrees, if you've got a window that has a surface of 35 degrees, the inside surface of the window, and your outside surface is 98.6, you are radiating heat to that window. The bigger the difference in temperature and the closer you get, the more you're radiating. So no matter how warm the air temperature is, you still may feel cold around that window. And we're just planning a bathroom retrofit. And my wife today was looking at windows, and I was suggesting to her that she might want to get the best window we can that is going to go next to a shower, because it's going to have a big difference in temperature. And unless we do that, it'll feel cold and uncomfortable next to that window. This is what I'm talking about, really. These are three: a single pane, double pane, and triple pane window. This makes the point, I think. It's 25 degrees outside. The painted glass, the inside painted glass here on the left is 30 degrees. That's single pane. The double layer is 54 degrees, and the triple layer is 70 degrees. So that's room temperature. You're not going to feel cold next to that, no matter, you see that there aren't even blinds there or shades or anything, and you never feel cold there. Again, any questions?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay. Okay, so you're trying to keep the heat in the air in the house. You're trying to limit the home to a limited amount of air changes per hour. And when you've done that, that's basically the first part of the equation here. The second part is to convert everything you can to electricity. The biggest thing in this climate is both heating and cooling. And heat pumps are a wonderful technology that do just that very efficiently. They convert, they replace, I should say, our use of fossil fuels with electricity. And they do that basically with refrigeration. You know where the cat hair, where you clean out the cat hair behind your refrigerator? If you ever reach down there and you feel it's warm, that's because that refrigerator is taking heat out of the refrigerator and dumping it into your house. And that's basically how a heat pump works. It's refrigeration technology, sometimes called a mini split, and or geothermal ground source heat pumps too. The mini split gets the heat from the air, like your refrigerator takes the heat out of the refrigerator, it's getting the heat from the air, and geothermal gets the heat from the ground. The advantage of geothermal is the ground is, in this climate, never colder than 55 degrees, and the further down you get, the warmer it gets. And by the way, we've got somebody here from New York, and I believe that the Empire State Building is heated and cooled with geothermal, done by a company from New Hampshire. And it's very efficient because it takes 1 unit of electricity and turns it into 2 to 4 units of heat, where you're taking 1 unit of oil or gas, if you're heating that way, and you're turning it into less than a unit of energy, of heat energy. That ratio is called the coefficient of performance, or a COP. And as I said, you often get a 3 or better. So this is courtesy of Mitsubishi. They were really kind to us when we were investigating heat pumps.
Mini splits is the term of art that people use for describing these heating and cooling systems. They call them a mini split because it's 2 different components typically, or more, but 1 indoor unit and 1 outdoor unit is a very common combination. The outdoor unit has a fan and a coil in it. And the indoor unit has a fan and a coil in it. The outdoor unit also has a compressor. And the two are connected through a couple of refrigerant lines, small copper tubes that run to the indoor unit from the outdoor unit and back. And the system uses electricity to run the compressor and the fans in the individual units to circulate refrigerant from the indoor unit to the outdoor unit. The refrigerant that's used and kept in that closed cycle is called 410A, is the refrigerant that's currently used. And it has a boiling point of -50 degrees. So when it's pushed into the outdoor unit and released into a low pressure state, it heads for its boiling point, which is colder than it is around here usually. So the heat energy that's in the air, even in the middle of winter when it's 0 or -10 degrees, when you're using a high performance cold climate heat pump, has more heat in it by density than the refrigerant when it's in that low pressure state. And so it warms up the refrigerant to the same temperature as outdoor air, let's say it's 0 degrees. And then that refrigerant goes into the compressor. When the compressor compresses that fluid and increases its pressure, it's also increasing the density of that heat energy. So that instead of the refrigerant going in at 0 degrees, it comes out the other side at around 140 or 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which is plenty hot, gets transferred along the refrigerant line to the indoor unit, heats up the indoor coil. The fan on the indoor coil blows that heat into the room, distributes it throughout the space. And then that now somewhat cool refrigerant returns to the outdoor unit to continue the cycle. Generating heat by burning anything or using electricity for that, all you're doing is putting in electricity to run electric motors. And so over the course of the season in New Hampshire, for every 1 unit of electricity you put into a high performance heat pump, you get between 2.5 and 3 units of heat energy out. And that's really where you get the tremendous savings, because for most of New Hampshire, we're at around 16 cents a kilowatt hour. That translates into a seasonal average of around $1.60 a gallon oil equivalent. It's certainly much cheaper than propane, almost half the cost of propane given today's price.
So one of the houses I followed, this was perhaps one of the coolest things that I've encountered in this project. By the way, I could have named, the alternate name for the book is What I Did on My COVID Vacation. But to get back to it, this is Jack Bingham's house, or I call it the house that Jack built. And he's got a greenhouse here. Jack had been doing some research on using heat pumps in greenhouses for agricultural purposes, and didn't have a lot of luck with it. So he adapted it to a house. And what he's done, he's got a tank in the base below the greenhouse here. And this is the case for the tank. This is the tank. It's all insulated. This is the cat observing the tank. No, he's not in there that I know of. I think Jimmy Hoffa's in there, actually. So this is a heat pump at the top of the greenhouse. Now, on a February day when it's sunny, we're talking about 80, 90 degrees up here. And since this was taken, this photo was taken, he's put a second heat pump up here. And so he takes the heat from the top of the greenhouse and transfers it into water that he's stored in the tank, and he uses it to heat his whole house. And it's very efficient. He's getting a coefficient of performance of 8 or 9. And this fellow, by the way, is the one he's net zero or even net positive. He charges his car with it. I think he spent $500 last year for all his utilities, heating, cooling, and electricity. So let's talk about solar. I read in National Geographic way back when that, I forget the exact price. I've actually been on researching it. I called the Air and Space Museum. I've been looking. I couldn't find the exact number, but the original cost of solar was about $1,000 a watt. It was more than $1,000 a watt. And that was used in 1962 for the first Telstar, which was the first communications satellite. And any of you rock and rollers may remember that song Telstar. It was an instrumental, and I'd sing it for you, but I'd drive you away. But this is Telstar before they launched it, and it was the first first satellite, I believe, to transmit any TV communications. The price of solar has come way down. This is a chart from 1977 to the present. The EU, the European, what is it? The European Energy Agency, or the International Energy Agency rather, ran a program over the 2000 to 2010, I believe, to try and lower the cost of solar worldwide, and it has been a raging success. And the price is like 1% of what it was, less than that at one point. And so the prices come down, and on the right-hand side, here is a map of the solar availability, the solar window for the United States. Here's Alaska over here, and this is Germany. And look at the potential that we have versus Germany. And the reason I bring that up is because Germany has been net positive at some point. They have lots of solar there. A few days last summer, they actually generated more energy than the country was using. And if they can do it, why can't we? Look at the difference in our solar window. So solar window, if you were going to put solar on your house, you're probably going to get an installer to do this. But so you know what you need to do, let's quickly go through this. This is the old-fashioned way I'm going to show you of figuring out whether you have a good site. And basically, you know that the sun is higher in the summer and lower in the winter, which is shown by these two charts here. And you can take what I did for my house here. This is looking out to the south of my house. And I got this chart from the University of Oregon online. And what I did was I got a protractor and I measured the angle to the top of the trees. And this chart represents the path of the sun. This is in December, and all the way out, this is June. So we're right about here now, somewhere. We're almost at the solstice. And then I took it, I transferred that, and this showed me that I had a dismal site for solar. I have 1 hour a day in December and a whopping 6 in May, June, and July, and then it falls off. So I had to have, and I did have trees cut down, which cost me money and made the whole project a little more expensive than it might have been otherwise, but it was well worth it. And so you generate energy. What do you do with it? Well, there's a couple of things you could do with it. This is a fellow who has old-fashioned lead acid batteries. He opened up the case for me to see them. I think there's 36 batteries here. He has to check each one and keep it full with distilled water. And you'll see here he's got ventilation for it. This is closed up. And these are a couple of the new Tesla power walls, which are the newer batteries that do a great job, but limited. And so that's one way you can go if you're going to be totally off the grid. Or what most people do is net meter. And that basically means, and this is different in every state, but net metering means when you've got excess energy, you put it back on the grid and it runs your meter backwards, giving you an account. You've got what do you call it? your net pot. It adds to your account, sorry. And so those are the two ways you could store it on. Basically, you're storing it on the grid or you store it in battery. So if you want to do solar, I suggest the first thing you do is collect your bills for a couple of years if you're already in a house. And if you can look at bills other than last year when there was COVID and your usage may be different, find out what your average usage is, and that'll give you an idea of what you need. You get a site, you figure out how much energy you'll get from the site, and then you can figure out the optimum, or your solar installer will figure out the optimum number of panels and system for you. One of the questions comes up a lot for homeowners is financing. You know, for a long time, you can walk into a car dealer and buy a car, be out of there in an hour, and with no problem. It's a little harder sometimes to. I think it's getting better, but it's hard to get financing sometimes. But often a solar dealer will help you. We did a project in my town where we got a group discount, and our goal was 13 new systems, and we ended up with 63 of them. And the reason for that was we were able to show people a way to do this with nothing out of pocket and where they had a neutral or better cash flow. And here's how it worked. We had a double loan scenario. There's a federal tax credit of 26%. It goes down, I believe, at the end of this year. In Massachusetts, there's a tax credit of 15% to 1,000. In New Hampshire, the Renewable Energy Fund, I believe, is still giving a credit. I think it's $750, but don't quote me. So the first loan covered the incentives at the end of the year. When we did our project at the end of the year, we got our tax credit. We paid that and the incentives directly to pay off the first loan. And then we had a second loan for the remainder of the project. And that loan, when you add the monthly cost of that loan and our current electric bill, it's less than we were paying previously. So we've always been cash positive. Honestly, that's minus the, I never added the cost of cutting the trees in. So for us, it wasn't quite as good. But the reason instead of 13 systems, we got 63 was because many, many, many people found that they were able to do this with no out-of-pocket costs. Owning a system is the best way at this point in time. However you generate your get your electricity that is generated renewably is a good thing. It needs to be done as quickly as possible. So there's other options for getting green energy. The next one is a lease purchase agreement. You will find many companies, or some companies, Sunrun is one of them. It's a national company that does third-party lease agreements. And basically what they do is they get financing. You install a solar on your roof. You're leasing your roof space to them, and then you agree to buy power from them for a period of time. After that, you can purchase the system, or you keep paying as a lease. This will keep pace. It'll be a little expensive probably than going from the grid, but it's going to go up as the grid prices go up. And in New Hampshire, Eversource went up by 1/3 last fall. So you're better off owning it if you can. Another way of doing it is purchasing green power from a third party. And with at least in New Hampshire, the PUC made this possible about 10 years ago, and it's, I don't know what the laws are in New York. I can tell you that New York is way light years ahead of New Hampshire policy. New York, Massachusetts, California are among the leaders, and I'm sad to say New Hampshire is among the laggards in energy policy. Moving back to this though, if you want to find out about incentives in your state or other incentives in New Hampshire, DSIRE USA, that's not Desire. I got that website. That was the wrong website. Incentives. This will give you all kinds of information, and it'll also give you information about solar contractors and prices currently near you. Anybody have any questions? Anybody still here? I gotta look here. Oh yeah. Hi, everybody. I haven't been, everybody's got their screens off so I can just see all these names. Real interactive. Okay, so my book, I followed 5 homes. 4 of them were net zero. As I said, they all, each one of them spent less than $500 a year for all their energy needs. They report it's the most comfortable houses they've ever lived in. They report feeling better, and they also report feeling good about taking responsibility for their carbon footprint. Here's what some of the owners of these houses have to say.
Yeah, it's by far the most comfortable house I've ever been in or owned. You know, there's no drafts, there's no hot spots, no cold spots. Very comfortable throughout. You can stand right next to a door or a window and not really feel the cold from the outside, even when it's, you know, down in the single digits.
Just totally delighted so far.
Great, great.
So my wife has allergies to dogs, cats, and dust mites. And we have, of course, dogs and cats. And in our new house, we have a really tight house and we have a fresh air system. She had episodes 4 to 6 times a year. And she's had none. We've had no more asthma, we've had no more irritation from air quality.
So, thank you very much. This is my book. It's available on Amazon and at my website, Warm and Cool Homes. And for this presentation, if you scan this Q code, you can get $5 off. I'd be happy to answer questions or anything else.
Anybody has questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or turn your cameras back on. I did link Wes's website in the chat as well.
I would leave you with this, that I assume most of you are already own homes and are interested in the perspective of this from retrofitting, that all the concepts that I've talked about here can be used in a retrofit, and you can start small. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all right away. You know, pick and choose what you can do. Start typically with air sealing and work your way. And you can, I went from 10 air changes an hour down to below 3 in my house. If I can do it, you can do it. So thank you again. I really appreciate your watching my tape.
Let me just pause the recording.